The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question for the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is now in session. Happy October 1st, everybody, and we are going to look at the situation within Ukraine. So, let's start. First of all, we are going to look at the eastern Zaporozhye / Dnipropetrovsk direction. The Russians, as of late, have been making more advances to the series of villages here, which is basically the eastern flank of the town of Guleipol. Now, the importance of the town of Guleipol is that if the Russians are able to take this town from the Ukrainians, then what it will basically do is doom the Ukrainian army in Orikhiv, and it will basically give the Russians basically a foothold in the greater northern Zaporozhye region. So they would have a much easier time advancing towards the city of Zaporozhye, which is the provincial capital of the oblast that is named after it. And also, if they're able to take the town of Guleipol, then the Russians should be able to enter Dnipropetrovsk region without that much of a problem. And now, to discuss the advances, yes, Russians have been advancing in this direction, and they have recently just started contesting for the very first village in this direction, which is Poltavka. They have advanced into the first streets, first blocks of Poltavka here, and as far as I know, the Ukrainians are struggling to stop the Russian advances in this direction. And in addition, if we go a little further up north, the Russians are also advancing along the Dnipropetrovsk border, especially in the village of Novohrihorivka. And there's also a report that the Russians have broken out of the villages of Stepove and Kalinivsky, and they have supposedly taken the village of Verbove. And I think the Vostok group, which has their Telegram channel, Vodin DV, has confirmed this advance, and they have taken control of this village. So now the Russians are aiming to break through the Ukrainian defenses here and attempt to take the village of Vishnivi. And if they're able to do this, then the road that separates Pokrovsky and Guleipol will be completely wide open, and if they're able to cut this road between the two towns, then the Ukrainian defenses will collapse throughout not just fall, but also winter. Now, moving to the Pokrovsk direction. Russians haven't really advanced a lot here as of late, but we can, I guess, assume that clashes are still ongoing for the city of Pokrovsk. And in the direction of the city of Mayanograd, which is basically adjacent to Pokrovsk or Krasnoyarsk, the Russians and the Ukrainians are fighting tooth and nail for these fields outside of Mayanograd. And if the Russians are able to solidify their control over these areas, then Mayanograd will be wide open for the taking. And apparently there are some reports by pro-Ukrainian sources that the entirety of Novoekonomichny is under Russian control, though some sources, especially Syriac here, which is the map that we're using for this video, still has a big chunk of the village under a gray zone. Not Ukrainian control or Russian control, but a gray zone. Now here's where things get really confusing, and I really do not like covering this direction. The Dobropillyya direction, that is. So Ukrainians looked like they were about to encircle the Russians in this direction here, but now it seems like that is no longer the case. Apparently, the Russians have advanced again in the village of Penkovka and have apparently seized over a half of it, so now they're already closing in on Volodymyrivka again and fighting for it. And also, Deep State has reported that Nove Shakove is under Ukrainian control, though we don't have any information to back those claims. Niknorivka was claimed to be fully captured by the armed forces of Ukraine, but again, this is according to Deep State, and it's not like they got a lot of geolocations to prove it. I mean, it seems as if both sides right now are not really releasing a lot of information from this direction because of how vital it is, but what we do know is that the Russians are advancing on the eastern flanks of these villages here. Shakove, Sofivka, Toretsky, Volodymyrivka, Novotoretsky, they are apparently advancing on the eastern flanks here. So they're trying to semi-encircle it. And if they're able to cut this road here, then it will be much easier for them to capture all these villages here and essentially end whatever hope the Ukrainians had for recapturing all these areas here. They claim they control a good chunk of these, along with encircling a group of Russians in the village of Kutry Yar, but we don't have enough information to confirm or deny these claims just yet. So, too early to tell. Now, looking at the Konstantinovka direction, the Russians appear to be finishing up the battles for Kleban Buk, but that's about it. So, pretty much next to no changes here. Konstantinovka remains pretty much contested. And again, the interesting direction as of late is Siversk. The Russians have advanced south of Siversk and are about to recapture the village of Vinka, and also are advancing on the northern flanks too. Multiple Russian sources, including Anatoly Radov, have confirmed the complete capture of Serebryanka, along with, of course, the complete capture of the Serebryansky forest. The Russians have also taken their very first blocks within Siversk, and apparently it was these areas here, which I don't know how it's within the limits of Siversk, but it is what it is. So the battle for Siversk has pretty much started, and I honestly don't know how long they're going to hold it, because, as all of you know by now, the Russians are fighting for the village of Yampol. This is very crucial. If the Russians are able to take Yampol, then this road that goes between Siversk and Liman will be cut off, and Siversk will be basically in a full-blown cauldron. So yeah, if you really take a look at the situation here, it appears that the Russians have taken control over these forested areas, and also, again, as I said in my previous video, that it appears that Zarachny, which is one of the last settlements before you enter Liman, has been completely captured by the Russian army. And because of this, it now makes any Russian operations within the city of Liman and Yampol a lot easier. And as you can see here, the northern part of Yampol is under Russian control, including the central Rada here. So it seems to be only a matter of time. I don't know how many weeks, maybe a month or two before Yampol completely falls. And then we're going to see whether or not if the Ukrainians are going to put up a fierce resistance for the city of Liman. But I don't honestly know if that's going to happen. Because if Yampol falls, this would cut off this road here. And we already know that this road here is cut off, which goes to the recently captured Chandri Holove. So you have two roads cut off, and these roads here are also cut off. So it only leaves one last road here, because the road between Liman and the city of Sylviansk and the Kramatorsk has been blown up by the Russians during the early phase of the invasion of Ukraine. So they cannot really go south. So the only route of evacuation is through the village or town of Droby Shive, or Droby Shive. So they can only go through here. But time is running out, because if Novoselivka falls, then nothing's going to stop the Russians from entering this area. So yeah, if I were them, I'd get out very quickly, though I don't think they're going to do that, because that's not, well, Siersky's style. So yeah, map is starting to slowly resemble what it looked like in 2022, well, in August 2022, that is before the Ukrainian counteroffensive. And in the city of Kupiansk, this will be the last thing we'll discuss for today's video. The Russians have continued their breakthrough within the city of Kupiansk, and it looks like the battle has been all but decided. It looks like those Azov reinforcements are not going to save the day. And as far as I know, it looks like many Ukrainians here have been caught completely in cauldron by the Russian army. This road here has been cut off. It's like a freeway, I think, that goes to the rest of the Kharkiv region. And also the road going south too has also been cut off. So downtown Kupiansk has pretty much now been encircled by the Russian army. And it all seems pretty much inevitable that the entirety of the western half of Kupiansk is going to fall. And then you have the eastern half here, which we don't know how many Ukrainians are in this direction. But one thing is for sure is that if the Russians are able to take complete control over the western half of Kupiansk, which is arguably the harder section to take over because of all these commie blocks here and the city center, then it will make basically eastern Kupiansk kind of a cakewalk. Now, Syriac had this part here in a gray zone, but he recolored it back in AFU control. I don't know why he did that, but that's what he did. I still think this is all a gray zone contested area, so yeah, I don't think it was a wise idea on his end to do that, but it is what it is. So yeah, the Russians are trying to finish off the Battle of Kupiansk before the end of 2025, and I am expecting personally for them to do so, and it's kind of strange that this is all happening. We all know that Pokrovsk may not end until 2026, at the latest, that is. But Liman, Siversk, and perhaps maybe even surprisingly Guleyapol at this point, and maybe Pokrovsk could all fall before 2026. But I might be very wrong. Well, at least when it comes to Pokrovsk and Zaporizhzhia directions. But Liman and Siversk and Kupiansk are very likely to fall before 2026. And maybe Borova too, if the Ukrainians are not able to hold their lines here. Because if Liman falls, then the Russians will have all sorts of freedom to move across these areas here, especially within this part of the Kharkiv region on the left bank of the Oskar River. But also, don't forget that if Kupiansk falls, then the Russians will be able to advance across the river here, alongside this river, and the Ukrainians will have no choice but to evacuate. So, yeah, nothing really going on in the Volchansk direction, nothing going on in the Sumy region, other than maybe some Ukrainian advances here near the Russian border, but that's about it. So anyway, folks, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, found it informative, and let me know in the comment section below what you think of the recent updates. And in addition, I want to point out that I'm going to be on a little trip to Chicago for a while, so don't expect a video so quickly. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys on Tuesday, and I'll catch you all later. So I hope all of you have a great day, and take care. Bye.